Hey, I'm looking forward to this session with you because I think I have a good word for you. And I'm going to use that word with emphasis, all right? But I want to tell you a little story first that goes along with this. Many years ago when I was in the war in Vietnam, I was on my riverboat, and it was a fiberglass riverboat, 30 feet long, 11 feet wide, and it would do about 40 miles an hour when it was not overstocked with too much ammunition or too many SEAL teams, too many SEAL team members on board. I couldn't carry but about four. But one day, I was on a lark, we'll call it. I had a satchel charge. Now, in the military, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm really focusing on veterans today, but I think non-veterans, civilians, you'll love this. So stay tuned with me. Stay close, all right? I was on a lark. I took a satchel charge and took we call it the firing mechanism or trigger, off of a hand grenade. It unscrews out, and I slid it into the C4, which is an explosive charge. I slid it into there, pulled the pin, threw the whole satchel charge overboard just to see what would happen. Well, I'll tell you what happened. It's not what happened, it's what didn't happen. It didn't sink like I thought it would. It didn't get more than a few inches underwater when it blew. It picked the whole boat up, and that was an 8-ton, 16,000-pound boat, and turned it 180 degrees. Everybody stayed on board. Nobody got hurt, but it was a shocker. But here's what happened. That satchel charge exploded apparently right over a school of fish. And thousands, tens of thousands possibly, of little fish surfaced, and they were knocked unconscious. And when that happened, the villagers on both sides of that little narrow part of the river jumped in their little river boats, they were called sampans, and they rowed out, and they are hauling in fish by the hundreds, to the point it looked like their little sampans were going to sink. And they were getting them as fast as they could, because some of the fish regained consciousness. Some of them were dead. Didn't matter. They were going to eat them. That day, I think I probably fed the whole village. Well, the reason I'm telling you that story, in the crowd of people that came out, a little boy rowed up, and he was sitting on the front of his sampan, rowing from the front of his sampan. And when he got up to my boat, he looked up, and he didn't have any fish. And I wondered why he didn't have any fish. Everybody else had fish. And I was about to find out. It would really be painful. It's a difficult memory for me even now. As our boats were rocking in the waves, when my boat was up, his was down. When mine was down, his was up, because there was probably a 5 or 6 foot difference between the keels. So as the waves went through, it just did that. Well, one of them hit wrong, and he fell over. And when he did, I realized why he didn't have any fish. He didn't have any legs. He couldn't bend over the side of his boat, this little sampan, and haul in the fish. And he explained that he had stepped on a landmine that the Viet Cong had set for Americans, and it blew both his legs off. It broke my heart. And Vietnamese are very polite people. You don't hand with one hand. That's how you feed a dog. In Vietnam, you use both hands. And so he said, "GI, you number one," which is very few words in English could those children say, but they knew how to beg for food. "GI," he said, "you number one, you give me chop chop." He's asked me to give him something to eat. Everybody else got fish. And I realized I don't have any fish in my boat. I wasn't collecting fish, but I had some of my old sea rats, combat rations. And in those combat rations that were, at that point in the war, we were still eating World War II combat rations, believe it or not. Little cans of canned meat, and you open some of them were so bad, it just gag you. But I gave him some combat rations. And when he reached up to take it with his two hands, his thumb, now I can't illustrate it very good because my thumb got blown off in that same war just shortly after that, this experience I'm telling you, but his thumb had the end on it, which this thumb doesn't work, but there's the end of it. And somebody had stepped on it because he walked on his hands. Somebody had stepped on his thumb, and it just pushed that thumbnail almost completely off. It was just hanging by just a little bit. And there were red streaks all the way up his arm, which means infection had set in, gangrene was setting in. I knew I had to tend to that little boy's thumb. So while he's eating his chop chop, with one hand, I'm putting a bandage in Mercure comb, and I pulled the old thumbnail off and threw it in the river. Bandaged his hand up with a big white, and he was so proud of it. He'd hold it up, and all the other children, they came rolling over. They wanted me to put a clean white bandage on their hand. Children are just amazing, aren't they? But I thought, he's probably going to lose his arm or he'll die. So when we left, I made a point to go back in what's called PSYOP, psychological operations. I went back with medics, and I found that little boy. And that thumbnail, wow, fully overnight, it fully grew back. You want to tell me that that's not a miracle? That little boy's thumbnail, don't worry, it was the same little boy. You don't find that many little kids with no legs and a thumbnail grown back. It was him. And he thought I was like Jesus, I walked on water. I healed his little thumb. I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that old saying, I think maybe the Marines came up with it, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, or something like that. Under difficult circumstances, we operate with a different mindset. We're not as brittle. We don't break as easy. We bend. We go with the flow. We fight for victory. It's not going to come easy at this time in our country. There's so much confusion, so much pain. I don't mean to be so long here, but hold on, because I want to really talk to my veteran friends right now. All you vets out there, most of you my age. Well, I say that, I don't know who's watching, but I do know a lot of Vietnam veterans have followed me on Facebook and on all of they're big in our ministry. And then, of course, we minister to thousands and thousands of modern day global war on terror veterans that have been injured. If you're a veteran, let me tell you what I want to say. I want you to don't miss this. I'm going to read it. It comes from the book of Mark, and let me get it back up here. It's chapter 7, and it's verse 7 of Luke. I said, pardon me, not Mark. Luke 7 and 7. And it starts out, wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come unto thee. That's the centurion saying to Jesus, I don't feel worthy to come to you. But if you will just say a word, my servant will be healed. If you'll just say a word. That's not asking for a whole lot, is it? That's not asking for mobile tents and surgical devices and all the things that go with a cash, or what they call MASH in the older days, portable hospitals. Just say your word. He said, for I'm a man set under authority. He was a centurion. He was an officer. And he said, I have soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes. I say to another, and he come, and he comes. And I say to another servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard these, this is verse 9 now, when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him. And he turned him about and said unto the people that followed him. The Bible shows that when he turned him about, he's now making him the object lesson. He's the illustration of the message. He turned him about, and he said to those that followed him, I say unto you, now get this, soldier of the past, warrior of the past. Maybe you're still in active duty, you're a warrior. How much does Jesus love the military? You're about to see. These are the words of Jesus. This comes from the 9th verse of the 7th chapter of Luke. And he said, I say unto you, I have not found so great a faith. No, not in Israel. The greatest faith that Jesus found was not even in his disciples. It wasn't in his family members. It wasn't in the synagogue. He said, I've never seen a greater faith than this man that he's using as an object of the lesson he's teaching. I've never seen such great faith as this man. Why was Jesus so impressed with this guy? Because this man understood authority. And you know what makes you as military men and women so powerful? You understand authority. Can you believe what would happen if you, with your understanding of authority, would say to Jesus, I have an understanding of authority. Therefore, my faith is qualified to believe that if you will just say the word, send your word, and the servants will be healed. The warriors will be healed. The family will be healed. A nation can be healed. Because the end of the story is, it came to pass that day, they went into the city and told the story that that servant was healed. What would we see if we could just have the faith of a military man to say, I know what authority is. And Jesus, just send your word and it will be done. God bless you. I'm Dave Roever. Thanks for watching.